There's one image from Saturday night that says more than any box score ever could. Long after the final whistle with the noise fading inside Empower Field, Josh Allen stood alone. No helmet, no anger, no excuses, just red eyes, a shaking voice, and a sentence that's starting to feel painfully familiar to fans of the Buffalo Bills. "I feel like I let my teammates down." That wasn't a throwaway quote, that was the weight finally showing. This wasn't just another playoff loss, it wasn't just another January disappointment. What we watched was the emotional breaking point of a franchise quarterback who's been carrying an entire organization on his back for nearly a decade, and for the first time you could actually see how heavy it's been. Josh Allen didn't storm off, he didn't blame officials, he didn't point fingers, he stood there and absorbed everything. The turnovers, the missed opportunity, the questions that come every single year when the season ends the same way, painfully close but never enough. And that's what made this moment different. Because Allen didn't look like a player who failed, he looked like a player who's exhausted from being asked to be perfect. Every drive, every game, every January, save us, carry us, fix it, do everything, and when something breaks, it always breaks on him. That's why this loss hit harder than most. Not because the Bills lost in overtime, not because of the controversial play that fans are still arguing about, but because once again, the season came down to Josh Allen needing to be Superman, and when even Superman stumbled for a moment, there was nothing underneath to catch the fall. Buffalo fans have seen heartbreak before. They've seen bad teams, bad quarterbacks, bad luck. This is different. This is watching one of the most gifted players of his generation give everything he has and walk off the field feeling like he failed everyone. And that forces a question nobody in Buffalo wants to answer yet. Is this really about Josh Allen coming up short? Or is this about an organization that keeps putting its entire season, its entire identity, on one man's shoulders and hoping he never cracks? Because on Saturday night, for the first time, the cracks weren't subtle anymore. They were right there in his voice. Being the face of a franchise sounds glamorous until you realize what it actually means in January. For Josh Allen, it means every win is shared and every loss is personalized. It means standing in front of a microphone after the season ends and feeling responsible for an entire city's disappointment. Not because anyone told him to say it, but because that responsibility has quietly become his role. That's why his words hit so hard after the game. "I feel like I let my teammates down." Most quarterbacks deflect in moments like that. They talk about missed opportunities as a group. They lean on coach speak. Allen didn't. He internalized it immediately, and that tells you everything about the position he's been put in for years now. In Buffalo, Josh Allen isn't just the quarterback. He's the offense. He's the bailout plan. He's the tone setter, the play extender, the guy who turns broken drives into miracles. When things go right, it's because he made something out of nothing. And when things go wrong, the expectation is the same: fix it anyway. That kind of pressure doesn't show up in stat sheets. It shows up in moments when a quarterback feels like one mistake erases everything else he did to keep the season alive. It shows up when leadership turns into self-blame, even when the circumstances are bigger than one player. And it shows up when the standard stops being play well and becomes be perfect. That's the trap Buffalo Bills has fallen into. Year after year, the formula stays the same. When the defense struggles, Allen has to score more. When the roster lacks depth, Allen has to compensate. When games get tight late, Allen has to become Superman. And most of the time he does. That's why Buffalo is relevant. That's why they're in the playoffs almost every year. But that relevance comes at a cost. Because when everything runs through one player, there's no margin for error. One turnover feels fatal. One stalled drive feels unforgivable. And the quarterback knows it. Allen knows it. You could hear it in his voice, not frustration, not anger, but disappointment in himself for not carrying the impossible one more time. That's what being the guy really means in Buffalo. It means the highs are incredible, but the lows are isolating. It means leadership without protection. And it means that when the season ends the same way again, the first instinct isn't to ask what went wrong around him, it's to ask why he couldn't do more. And that weight doesn't get lighter with experience. It gets heavier. Because the longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to separate Josh Allen the player from Josh Allen the solution to every problem. And that's not sustainable, no matter how great he is. But the most revealing part, he's still willing to carry it, even when it's clearly costing him more than anyone wants to admit. This is where the Josh Allen conversation gets uncomfortable, because the performance and the result don't line up the way people want them to. On paper, Josh Allen did exactly what a franchise quarterback is supposed to do in a playoff game. He threw for nearly 300 yards, he accounted for multiple touchdowns, he ran when nothing else was there. He dragged the offense into overtime in a game that was slipping away. For long stretches, he was the only reason the season was still alive. And yet, the season ended the same way it always does. That's the contradiction Buffalo keeps running into. Because when you watch the game, it's clear Allen wasn't overwhelmed, he wasn't outmatched, he wasn't shrinking from the moment, he was actively creating it. Third downs, broken plays, pressure in his face, those were the moments where Buffalo stayed afloat almost entirely because of him. But playoff football doesn't grade on effort or brilliance alone. It grades on outcomes. And this is where the story turns: 4 turnovers, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, 3 of them directly turned into points in a game decided by a single possession. Those plays matter. Allen knows they matter, that's why he didn't dodge responsibility after the game. That's why he didn't point to his yards or his touchdowns or the hits he took. He went straight to accountability. The problem is context. Those mistakes didn't happen in a vacuum. They happened because the margin for error was microscopic, because every drive mattered, because the defense couldn't consistently get stops, because the offense was built in a way that required Allen to push, extend, and force the issue over and over again. That's the price of dependency. When one player is responsible for almost everything, the highs look heroic and the lows look catastrophic. A fumble isn't just a mistake, it's a turning point. An interception isn't just a bad read, it's the season tipping in the wrong direction, and when that's the standard, the outcome will always overshadow the performance. That's what makes this so frustrating for fans of the Buffalo Bills. Because you can acknowledge Allen's mistakes and still recognize the bigger issue. You can say he has to protect the ball better while also admitting that asking one player to generate nearly all of the offense, all of the momentum, and all of the solutions is a dangerous formula in January. This game wasn't lost because Josh Allen wasn't good enough. It was lost because Buffalo needed him to be flawless, and flawless is an impossible standard, even for elite quarterbacks. When the outcome always outweighs the performance, the story never changes, it just gets harsher. And that's the pattern Buffalo can't seem to escape. Because as long as the result keeps erasing everything Allen does to keep them alive, every playoff run will end with the same question: not how did he play, but why wasn't it enough? This is the stretch of the game that will live in Buffalo's memory the longest, not because it tells the whole story, but because it exposed how fragile everything really was. When people talk about the loss, they immediately jump to the turnovers. And yes, they mattered. Josh Allen knows that better than anyone. 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. In a 3-point overtime loss, those plays loom large. There's no pretending they didn't swing momentum. But here what gets lost when those moments are isolated. Every single one of those mistakes happened in a game where the margin for error was already gone. Buffalo wasn't playing with a cushion. They weren't controlling tempo. They were constantly chasing stability. That changes how a quarterback plays, even one as gifted as Allen. Take the fumble before halftime. That wasn't carelessness, it was urgency. Buffalo was trying to steal points before the break because they couldn't trust that the defense would hold. Then came the strip sack early in the second half, a moment that felt like the floor dropping out. Suddenly, the Bills were behind again and the pressure doubled. That's when the trap snapped shut. When a quarterback is responsible for creating almost everything, every risk gets magnified. Allen wasn't freelancing for highlights. He was freelancing because the alternative was stagnation. Standing still wasn't an option. Playing safe wasn't an option. The offense needed movement, aggression, and answers immediately. And yet those moments will be replayed over and over. Critics will slow them down, freeze the frames, ask why he didn't protect the ball better, and those questions are fair, but they're incomplete, because the real issue is that Josh Allen made mistakes. It's that when he made them, there was nothing in place to absorb the damage. That's the difference between contenders and survivors. In balanced playoff teams, a turnover hurts, but it doesn't end everything. A defense gets a stop. A running game steadies things. A special teams play flips the field. For the Buffalo Bills, none of that materialized consistently. When Allen stumbled, the entire structure shook. And that's why these plays feel heavier than normal. Not because Allen failed, but because the system failed the moment he wasn't superhuman. The Bills weren't built to withstand imperfection. They were built to ride greatness and hope it never wavered. That's an impossible expectation in January. So yes, these were the plays that changed the game. But they also revealed something deeper, a team designed with no safety net, no buffer, and no plan B when its quarterback is human for even a second. And in the playoffs, that design flaw always shows itself eventually. This time it just showed up all at once. This is the moment fans will argue about for years, not because it explains everything, but because it poured gasoline on an already burning frustration. Late in overtime, with the season hanging by a thread, Josh Allen took the shot Buffalo needed. A deep throw, tight coverage, a bang-bang play that decided whether the drive and the year would continue. The ruling on the field stood, and within seconds it was over. That's when the debate exploded. Many fans believe the play deserved a review. Others argue it was simultaneous possession. Some insist the receiver completed the catch. Social media lit up immediately, former players weighed in, and slow-motion clips started circulating with everyone seeing something different. What bothered people most wasn't just the call, it was the lack of pause. No extended discussion, no long review, just a season ending in real time. And that's why this moment hit a nerve. In playoff football, especially in overtime, fans expect transparency. Even if the call goes against you, there's comfort in knowing every angle was examined. When that doesn't happen, frustration fills the gap. For many watching, it felt rushed. It felt final in a way that didn't allow closure. But here's the uncomfortable part that gets lost in the outrage. This game should never have come down to one ruling. The Buffalo Bills were already living on the edge long before that snap. Turnovers earlier in the game flipped momentum. Defensive breakdowns kept Denver alive. Buffalo needed overtime just to survive. By the time that controversial play happened, the margin for error had already disappeared. That's why the officiating debate, as emotional as it is, can't be the entire story. Yes, fans have every right to question the call. Yes, the moment deserved scrutiny. And yes, in a league built on precision, inconsistency hurts trust. But reducing this loss to officiating alone lets the bigger issue off the hook, the reality that Buffalo was once again asking its quarterback to save everything at the very end. The call didn't create the problem. It exposed it. Because when your season hinges on a single snap, a single throw, a single judgment call, you're already operating without a safety net. Elite teams don't leave their fate to interpretation. They don't need perfection from the officials to survive. That's the painful truth Bills fans are wrestling with. The controversy will be debated forever, but deep down, most people know this loss wasn't stolen in overtime. It was set up over 4 quarters of imbalance, pressure, and dependence. And that's why the anger feels so heavy, because even if the call went the other way, the bigger question would still be waiting. Why does everything in Buffalo always come down to one moment? This is the part Buffalo keeps running from because it's not dramatic, it's structural. The Buffalo Bills aren't losing in January because they lack talent at quarterback. They're losing because the entire operation is built on a formula that collapses the moment things get uncomfortable. And Saturday night was the clearest example yet. Buffalo's defense couldn't hold. They gave up big plays, they struggled to get off the field. They allowed points in moments when momentum needed to stop. And every time that happened, the response was automatic and familiar: Josh Allen, fix it. That's the formula. When the defense bends, Allen has to score. When it breaks, Allen has to score faster. When the roster lacks depth, Allen has to extend plays. When the game tightens, Allen has to become the run game, the passing game, and the emotional engine all at once. It's survival football disguised as contention. And it works until it doesn't. Buffalo finished the game with Allen accounting for the overwhelming majority of their offensive production. Passing, rushing, converting third downs, keeping drives alive that had no business surviving. For stretches, it looked heroic. But that heroism came at a cost, zero margin for error. That's where this formula fails. In January, against disciplined teams, you don't get to live on miracles. You need balance. You need moments where the quarterback can hand the game over to someone else and breathe. Buffalo doesn't offer Allen that luxury. When he's not perfect, the whole structure shakes. That's not an accident, it's design. The Bills have built a roster that assumes their quarterback will always cover the cracks. When he does, they look dangerous. When he slips even slightly, the entire operation stalls. There's no fallback, no stabilizer, no phase of the game that can quietly take over when Allen needs help. And that's why this keeps happening. Not because Allen isn't good enough, not because he doesn't rise to the moment, but because the team around him requires him to rise every single time. The moment he doesn't, the season ends. This is why Buffalo's playoff exits feel so similar despite different opponents and different circumstances. The variables change, but the dependency doesn't. One player remains responsible for everything, and that's a losing equation when the stakes are highest. Championship teams distribute pressure, Buffalo concentrates it. And until that changes, until Allen is allowed to be excellent instead of superhuman, January will keep exposing the same flaw. Because no quarterback, no matter how gifted, can carry a broken formula forever. This is the part that makes this loss sting more than all the others, because this year was supposed to be different. For the first time in the National Football League era defined by elite quarterback roadblocks, the path was open. No Patrick Mahomes standing in the way, no Joe Burrow looming, no Lamar Jackson waiting on the other side. For once, the AFC didn't feel like a gauntlet, it felt like an invitation. And that's what makes this loss so heavy for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Every season before this, there was an easy explanation. Ran into a dynasty, lost to an MVP, fell short against a quarterback playing at his absolute peak. This year stripped those excuses away. The conference didn't collapse, but it softened. The window didn't blow open, but it cracked just enough. And Buffalo still couldn't get through. That's why this doesn't feel like just another playoff exit. It feels like a squandered moment in time. A season that will be looked back on and quietly labeled, that was the one, not because everything was perfect, but because the obstacles were fewer than they've ever been. Allen was the best quarterback left standing in the AFC. That wasn't a hot take, it was reality. And yet the Bills still found themselves relying on duct tape and hope. Late season signings, inconsistent production outside of Allen, an offense where the second most targeted receiver in a playoff game was someone who wasn't even part of the original plan. That's not championship infrastructure, that's survival. This was the year when Buffalo needed to prove it could win without requiring Allen to do everything. The year when balance could have replaced desperation. Instead, the same pattern showed up at the worst possible time. When adversity hit, there was no cushion. When Allen stumbled, there was no one underneath to stabilize the moment. That's what separates missed chances from bad luck. The AFC won't stay like this forever. The stars who were absent will be back. New quarterbacks are already rising. The conference doesn't pause for anyone, and that's the quiet fear sitting underneath this loss, that Buffalo just let the cleanest opportunity of the Josh Allen era slip through its fingers. Windows don't slam shut overnight. They narrow slowly, subtly, one missed chance at a time. And years from now, when people look back at Allen's career, this season may stand out not for what went wrong, but for what was finally available and still not taken. That's why this year hurts more than the rest. Because it wasn't blocked. It was wasted. At some point, the conversation has to shift, because this is no longer about whether Josh Allen is good enough. That debate is over. What Saturday night exposed wasn't a quarterback who can't win the big one. It exposed an organization that keeps asking its best player to be everything, and acting surprised when that eventually collapses. Allen has proven over and over that he can elevate a franchise. He's dragged the Buffalo Bills from irrelevance into annual contention by sheer force of will. That part is undeniable. But championships aren't won on will alone. They're won on margin, on depth, on balance, on having a team that can survive the moments when its quarterback is human. Buffalo doesn't give Allen that margin. When he's great, they're alive. When he's imperfect, even briefly, everything falls apart. That's not a Josh Allen problem, that's a structural one. What made this loss feel different wasn't the turnovers or the controversy or even the missed opportunity year. It was the image at the end. Allen walking alone, not angry, not defiant, just exhausted. Exhausted from carrying expectations that no player should have to carry by himself for nearly a decade. Listen to the locker room afterward. Teammates didn't point fingers, they defended him. They wished they could do more for him. That's not the sound of a fractured team. That's the sound of a team that knows its quarterback is being asked to cover too many cracks. And here's the scary part for Buffalo. Time doesn't stop. The AFC won't stay forgiving. The quarterbacks who were absent will return. New ones are already rising. Windows don't close with a slam, they narrow quietly year by year until one January you realize the opportunity is gone. Josh Allen is still in his prime, he's still elite. He's still capable of winning a Super Bowl, but primes aren't infinite. And asking one player to be the offense, the identity, the crisis manager, and the miracle worker every single season is not a sustainable plan. So the real question Buffalo has to answer is whether Josh Allen can win a championship. It's whether this organization is willing to change the formula that keeps wasting his best years. Because if nothing changes, if Allen is still expected to be perfect or else, then January will keep ending the same way, with silence, with frustration, and with one of the most talented quarterbacks of his generation walking off the field feeling like he failed everyone. And that would be the real tragedy. Not that Josh Allen never won a Super Bowl, but that the Bills never gave him the team he deserved to win one.